I never thought a little curiosity could break everything. It was just my sister, sitting at the kitchen table with that tiny white envelope in front of her. Sunlight caught the corner, making it glow like it was more important than it really was. She laughed softly, almost nervously, and said, "It's just for fun. You know, a DNA test." But the way her fingers hovered over the seal. I don't know. Something about it felt wrong. A few days later, the house felt different. She stopped laughing at the dinner table. Mom tried to make small talk, asking about her day, but my sister's responses were clipped, almost rehearsed. Dad, who's usually the calm one, was quieter, his eyes flicking toward her with this strange, unreadable tension. I wanted to ask what was going on, but something in the way she avoided my gaze stopped me. It was like the air itself had thickened. Then one evening, I found her in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, the envelope open, the little test results glowing on her phone screen. She didn't notice me at first. She was staring, completely absorbed, her lips moving slightly, whispering words I couldn't hear. The wind rattled the blinds, the house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the wall clock, and I felt my stomach twist. Finally, she looked up at me, eyes wide, almost frightened. "It changes everything," she said, voice barely audible over the silence. And in that moment, I realized nothing would ever feel normal again. I should have walked away. I should have left her to deal with it alone. But I couldn't. My mind was spinning with questions, each one darker than the last. Who were we, really? Who was Dad? And why did my sister look at him like she had just discovered a stranger living in our house for decades? That night, I didn't sleep. Every familiar sound, every shadow in the corners of our home, felt different. And I had no idea how deep the secrets ran. Before that envelope appeared on the kitchen table, our house felt like a safe bubble. I could almost close my eyes and hear the rhythm of it, the soft hum of Dad's old coffee machine in the mornings, Mom shuffling through the laundry while humming off-key to some song from decades ago, and my sister, always tapping at her phone or sketching in her notebook in the corner. It was ordinary, almost boring, but comforting. Dad had this habit of drumming his fingers on the counter while thinking, a little frown knitting his brow, and yet he always managed a joke at the perfect moment. Mom would roll her eyes at him, but the smile that crept onto her face betrayed the amusement she tried to hide. And my sister, well, she was chaotic in a charming way, leaving bits of paper everywhere, always late to dinner, but somehow we all fell into place around her mess. I remember thinking, sitting at the table that Saturday morning, that our family was simple. Not perfect, never perfect, but solid. We fought sometimes, sure, over trivial things, a misplaced jacket, a forgotten dish, but there was always an unspoken line we never crossed. A kind of safety net made of shared memories, small rituals, and predictable habits. I felt secure, like I had a map for this little world of ours. Evenings were my favorite. Dad would sit in his recliner, Mom beside him with her knitting, and my sister would flop on the couch, phone in hand but laughing at something she'd read. I'd make a cup of tea and just watch, feeling this warmth settle in my chest. The sound of our home, faint TV murmurs, the creak of the floorboards, the occasional bark of the neighbor's dog, felt like it belonged only to us, and yet. Now I notice how fragile it all seemed. Small glances, half-finished sentences, subtle shifts in tone that I never paid attention to before. That morning, that week, I couldn't have guessed that this fragile equilibrium was about to fracture. But even in the calmest moments, there's always a hint of shadow, waiting for a crack to slip through. It started with small things, almost unnoticeable if you weren't paying attention. My sister, who used to answer every question with a smirk or a teasing remark, suddenly gave one-word responses. Fine, okay, sure. Her laughter, once bright and constant, had dulled to a rare, almost forced chuckle. I remember catching her staring out the window for minutes on end, her fingers tapping nervously against the arm of the couch, like she was waiting for something, or someone. I tried to ask what was wrong. Nothing, she'd mutter, eyes avoiding mine, hands clenching the edge of a pillow. But there was a tremor in her voice, a hesitation that made my stomach twist. Mom noticed it too. Though she said nothing at first, quietly trying to maintain the old routines, breakfast together, dishes after dinner, the little rituals that had always held us together. Dad, on the other hand, became quieter. His habitual jokes stopped, his smiles became slower to appear, almost measured. Something was off, and I could feel it even before I understood why. Then came the inconsistencies. Stories she had told me 100 times suddenly changed in small details. Names swapped. Dates shifted. I thought maybe I was imagining things, maybe my memory was playing tricks, but the nagging sense of unease wouldn't leave. One evening, I overheard her muttering into her phone while pacing the hallway, "I can't tell them yet. Not like this." She paused, holding the silence like it was a secret too heavy to carry, and then whispered, almost to herself, "They'd never understand." I felt trapped between patience and panic. Part of me wanted to give her space, to let her handle whatever this was alone. Another part, the louder, panicked part, wanted to know everything immediately. But she refused to meet my gaze, refused to share, leaving me staring at her retreating back like a stranger moving through my own home. That's when I realized the first true crack in our family's foundation had appeared. And it wasn't just her distance, it was the silence that came with it, thick and suffocating, filling every corner of the house I had once felt was mine. By the end of that week, the normal rhythms of our home, the clinking of dishes, the hum of the washing machine, the distant TV in the living room, suddenly felt foreign. I began noticing tiny, almost invisible signs, a glance held too long, a foot tapping under the table, a sigh cut off before it could escape. Something was coming, and I had no idea how big it would be. It was late one night, the kind of quiet that makes every creak of the house sound louder. I found her in my room, sitting on the edge of my bed, shoulders hunched, phone clutched in her hands like it was a lifeline. She didn't say anything at first. Just stared at the floor, chewing her lip, tapping her thumb nervously against her phone case. I remember thinking how small she looked, how fragile, like she was holding back a storm that could sweep through the entire house. Finally, she whispered, "I can't tell Mom and Dad yet. Not like this." I froze. "Tell me," I said softly. My voice sounded too loud in the silence, too urgent. She shook her head, fingers tightening around the device. "You're my brother. You have to hear this first. But you might not understand. You might hate me." Her words landed like stones in my chest. Hate her? For what? I didn't know, and that uncertainty made my stomach twist. She took a deep breath, and the words came slowly, carefully. "It's the DNA test. I got the results today. And they're weird. Not what I expected. Things I thought were true aren't. I'm still figuring it out, but I couldn't keep it from you." I tried to speak, to ask questions, but she held up a hand, silencing me. Her eyes were wide, pleading, and I realized she wasn't ready to say everything. She was afraid of the fallout, afraid of breaking the fragile balance of our family. All I could do was nod and sit beside her, feeling the weight of her panic without fully understanding why. The room smelled faintly of lavender from my diffuser, the soft hum of it filling the spaces between her words and the silence. I wanted answers. I wanted clarity. But I didn't get either. Instead, I got that pause, that look of desperation, and the sense that the world I thought I knew was beginning to tilt on its axis. That night, I didn't sleep. Every shadow in the room seemed to stretch longer, every distant car horn outside felt closer, sharper. I kept thinking about the things she didn't say, the secrets she was holding, and the walls I would soon have to climb just to see what had been hidden from me all along. Whatever this was, it wasn't just her problem. It was about to become mine too. Over the next few days, the house felt like it was holding its breath. My sister avoided the kitchen at breakfast, left doors slightly ajar as if she might disappear through them at any moment, and spoke to us in fragments, careful not to reveal too much. But small things slipped through, little clues that made my mind spin with possibilities. A glance shared with Mom that lingered too long, a half-finished sentence with Dad that didn't quite add up, a whispered sigh as she closed her bedroom door. I began connecting dots that might not even belong together. Maybe our father wasn't really our father, I thought. Maybe she had discovered something about our family lineage, some long-buried secret. It sounded absurd, but the way she looked at him, the way she hesitated around him, made me doubt everything I had taken for granted. I found myself replaying old memories, moments I had dismissed as ordinary, and suddenly, they felt like puzzles with missing pieces. One night, I caught her in the hallway, pacing, muttering under her breath. "It's not what he thinks. Not yet. They can't know." She froze when she noticed me. Don't overthink it," she said, voice trembling. But of course, I did. I couldn't help it. Every unanswered question, every subtle gesture became fuel for the story my mind was building. I imagined whispered conversations, secrets folded into letters never opened. Truths hidden behind smiles and holiday dinners. I started to feel like I was living in a house full of ghosts, ghosts of the family I thought I knew. Every laugh sounded hollow, every casual touch felt rehearsed, every glance between my sister and dad or mom seemed loaded with meaning. I convinced myself I had it figured out, even though I only had fragments. Maybe our father wasn't our father, maybe the truth had been hidden from us all along, maybe this was some secret that had been waiting decades to surface. By the end of the week, I felt both terrified and oddly prepared. Terrified because the pieces I had glimpsed suggested a betrayal I couldn't yet name. Prepared because, in my mind, I believed I understood the secret. I thought I had solved the puzzle before anyone else. But as I would soon discover, sometimes a puzzle is more complicated than it looks, and the truth, when it finally comes, is far heavier than any rumor we imagine. It finally happened one rainy evening. I found her in her room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, phone in hand, the soft light of the screen reflecting off her wide, anxious eyes. She looked exhausted, like she'd been carrying something far too heavy for weeks. "Okay," she whispered, barely audible over the patter of rain against the window. "I'll tell you. But you have to promise. No one else, not yet. Not until we figure this out." I nodded, sitting on the edge of her bed, heart hammering. She took a deep breath, fingers trembling as she scrolled through the DNA results. "Dad. He's not our biological father." Her words hit me like a fist, though part of me had already suspected something. But the way she said it, almost in disbelief herself, made my stomach drop. "I know it sounds impossible, but it's true. Everything we thought about our family. It's not exactly what we imagined." Then she hesitated, biting her lip, before blurting the next part. "But it's not like we're fatherless. You know Mr. Benson? The guy who's been coming to holidays and birthdays for 30 years, our parents' close family friend." I froze, a shiver running down my spine. He's actually our biological dad. Mom and Dad never told us. I think they thought it was for the best." I blinked, trying to make sense of it. Mr. Benson, the man who always joked about embarrassing stories from his youth, who played catch with us in the backyard, who brought us homemade cookies every Christmas, he'd been hiding this secret all along. I felt a strange mix of relief and confusion. Relief that my sister and I weren't somehow disconnected from our past, confusion at how Dad could keep this from us for so long. She looked at me, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I think maybe it was supposed to protect us. Maybe Mom and Dad thought it would be too much if we knew." I nodded, trying to believe her, to accept this partial explanation. For a moment, I felt like I understood, like the storm had passed. And I could breathe again, but as I glanced toward the hallway, the faint sound of Mr. Benson's laugh drifting from the living room, I felt a flicker of unease. Something in the way he joked, the way Dad's smile had been a little too forced, whispered that this wasn't the full story. The truth, I suspected, was still hidden somewhere just out of reach, waiting for the right moment to surface. The next family gathering felt off. Everything looked normal on the surface, lights twinkling on the tree, the faint scent of cinnamon in the air, Dad carving the turkey with his usual exaggerated flourish, but underneath it all, the air was charged, taut. My sister and I exchanged glances across the room, a silent acknowledgement that nothing about tonight felt ordinary, Mr. Benson was there, as always, joking with Mom about some long-forgotten mishap from decades ago. He smiled, laughed, passed around plates of cookies, the same way he always had. But I noticed the little things, the way his eyes flicked toward Dad for just a fraction of a second before returning to the conversation, the almost imperceptible pause in Mom's laughter, like she was measuring her words. It was subtle, but I couldn't unsee it. Something was beneath the surface, something carefully hidden. I tried to focus on the small comforts, the hum of the heater, the soft clatter of dishes, the way my sister's elbow nudged mine under the table, but the unease never left. Every glance between Dad and Mr. Benson felt loaded, every joke had a weight behind it. And when Mr. Benson leaned down to hand me a plate of pie, there was a flash in his eyes, an expression so quick I almost missed it, like he knew more than he should. Halfway through dinner, my sister whispered, barely audible over the chatter, "It's not what it seems. I can feel it." I wanted to press her for answers, but I didn't. Something told me that tonight wasn't the night for truths, that this holiday, with all its familiar sights and smells, was a carefully orchestrated mask. A mask hiding something far more complicated than I could yet understand. By the time dessert came, I was tense, watching, listening, noticing everything. The way Dad's hand lingered over his fork, the way Mr. Benson's smile twitched at the edges, the way Mom's laugh sounded just a little too practiced. I forced myself to smile, to make small talk, but inside, a storm was brewing. I wanted to believe the partial truth my sister had given me, that Mr. Benson was just a hidden biological father, nothing more. But deep down, I knew that something was still unresolved, something that could undo the fragile sense of understanding we thought we had. And as the evening drew to a close, and the house grew quiet except for the soft tick of the clock, I realized it, the mask was still in place, and the real story, one far darker and more complicated, was only waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. It hit me like a thunderclap. I wasn't ready, not in the least. One evening, after the holiday dishes were cleared and the house had settled into that uneasy silence, my sister pulled me aside again. Her hands shook as she held my arm, eyes wide and frantic. "There's more," she whispered. "You need to know the full truth." At first, I thought I could handle it. I thought I already understood, Dad wasn't biologically mine, Mr. Benson was, everything made sense. But then she dropped it, slowly, carefully, as if the words themselves could burn us. "He knew," she said. "Mr. Benson. He knew about us the whole time. Mom told him. He's been paying Mom, quietly, in cash, for years." I froze. My chest tightened. Paying Mom? All those holidays, all those dinners, all that time. He knew he had children he was never supposed to publicly acknowledge, and yet he came here, smiled, laughed, played with us like nothing had changed. I felt a rush of betrayal so fierce it stole my breath. And then, Dad's face flashed in my mind, calm, patient, gentle. And suddenly, I saw the cracks I'd ignored. He had known, too. He had let us live in this illusion, protectively, or selfishly, I didn't know which. The storm of thoughts was relentless. I replayed every moment with Mr. Benson, every conversation, every shared glance. Everything that once felt familiar now carried a shadow, a secret weight. I wanted to scream, to confront, to run, but my voice felt caught in my throat. My sister squeezed my arm. "I can't stand it anymore," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "All these years. All these lies." I felt sick, dizzy, as though the ground beneath me had disappeared. The people I trusted most, my parents, the man I called Dad, the family friend I thought of as just that, were all actors in a play I didn't audition for. And the truth? The truth was heavier than I could bear. The people who raised us, loved us, protected us, had done so with half-truths and secret arrangements. My family, the world I thought I knew, had been built on careful deceptions that were only now collapsing. I didn't know how to move. How do you live in a house that feels like a stranger's home? How do you trust people who smiled at you while hiding the most important pieces of your life? I wanted answers, but the answers only made the emptiness deeper. And in that quiet, suffocating moment, I realized something horrifying: the illusion wasn't just shattered, it was gone, and nothing would ever feel whole again. The days that followed felt like walking through a house made of glass. Every step threatened to shatter something fragile. Conversations were cautious, measured. Dad's usual warmth was gone, replaced by a quiet distance that made him almost unrecognizable. Mom's smiles were tight, forced, as if each one required effort she didn't have. Even my sister, who had always been the most chaotic part of the house, seemed smaller now, carrying the weight of the truth like it had hollowed her out. I tried to talk to Dad, to understand why he never told us, why he let Mr. Benson hover in our lives like some invisible thread connecting the past we didn't know we had. But his answers were careful. Vague, protective. I could see the guilt behind his eyes, the shame he carried silently. And yet, every explanation only left me more unsettled. I wanted anger, confrontation, maybe even justice, but all I felt was confusion and exhaustion. Mr. Benson remained present in our lives, his warmth toward us unchanged, yet everything about it felt tainted. Every joke, every casual glance, every small gesture carried the weight of knowledge he had kept secret for decades. And I couldn't separate the man who had brought us cookies, told stories, and laughed at our quirks, from the man who had quietly funded our upbringing behind the scenes, never once acknowledging the truth openly. Even my sister and I were fractured. We spoke in hushed tones, shared glances that carried too much meaning, and avoided certain topics entirely. I wanted to comfort her, to act like we were still a team, but the tension between knowing too much and wanting to protect each other made everything awkward. The house was full of the same sounds: TV hum, floorboards creaking, distant traffic, but they felt alien now, as if we were living in someone else's story. I kept replaying memories, trying to reconcile the people I loved with the secrets they carried. Was this betrayal intentional, or an act of misguided protection? Could I ever forgive them? Could I even trust myself to feel normal again? Every step through the house was cautious, every conversation measured, and every smile, whether mine or theirs, felt like a fragile lie stretched across the edges of a fractured home. Weeks have passed since the truth came out, but nothing has returned to normal. The house feels smaller, quieter, and somehow heavier, as if the walls themselves are holding the memory of every lie. Dad sits in his chair, silent more often than not, and I catch him staring at old family photos like he's trying to remember a life he thought he'd built honestly. Mom moves around the house carefully, careful not to step on invisible cracks, careful not to upset the fragile balance. And my sister. She drifts through the rooms like a shadow, still carrying the weight of what she uncovered, still unsure whether to scream or stay silent. I find myself questioning everything about my own reactions. Should I be angry at them? At Mr. Benson? At the idea of a family that felt real but wasn't fully mine? Or should I try to forgive, to accept the complexity of their choices? The line between protection and deception has blurred so completely that I don't know where blame begins and ends. Sometimes, I catch myself smiling at a memory: Dad's bad jokes, Mr. Benson's ridiculous holiday stories, Mom humming in the kitchen, but the warmth is fleeting, overshadowed by the knowledge that the story we believed was only half true. The rest? That part will probably never feel safe to touch. And yet, life moves forward, whether we're ready or not. I can't stop thinking about one question, the one that keeps me awake at night: was I wrong to assume the worst? Could trust ever be rebuilt after this? Or has the knowledge of what was hidden, no matter how long it was kept, forever changed the people I thought I knew? I don't have the answers. And maybe that's the point. Families aren't perfect. And love isn't always simple. Sometimes, it's messy, secretive, and even devastating. But it's ours. Or at least, what's left of it. And now, I wonder. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you confront the people you love, or let some truths remain buried, even if the silence slowly breaks you from the inside?